All right, so you've been digging into the Philistines, huh? Wanting to get past that whole David and Goliath story.
Sounds familiar.
And you know what? Good call. Because there's a lot more to them than just their biblical bad rap.
Yeah, they get a pretty bad rap in the Bible.
They really do. We're talking about a fascinating culture that was right in the middle of some major historical turning points.
Oh, absolutely. They were right there in the thick of it.
So you want the inside scoop, their origins, their culture, their interactions with other groups like the Israelites? Well, get this. We have an expert in ancient Near Eastern history joining us for this deep dive.
Happy to be here.
They're going to help us unpack all the twists and turns. Buckle up. This is going to be good.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Now, I'm guessing when you hear Philistines, you probably picture giants, enemies of the Israelites, right? Get ready for a perspective shift.
It's true. The biblical narrative doesn't exactly paint them in the best light. But honestly, their story is way more interesting than just being villains. I mean, they were a complex society, deeply interwoven with the major events of their time.
Okay, so let's set the stage. We're talking late Bronze Age, right? What's the historical backdrop for these guys?
Picture this. Around the 12th century BC, things are seriously unraveling in the ancient Near East. Empires are collapsing, trade routes are disrupted, and there's this sense of widespread chaos. We call it the Late Bronze Age collapse.
Feels like a rough time to be around, for sure.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to be there.
So how do the Philistines fit into this whole picture?
They emerge right in the heart of it. This is where we encounter the mystery of the Sea Peoples, these maritime raiders who appear to be wreaking havoc across the Mediterranean. Think Vikings, but centuries earlier.
Wow.
Now, many historians believe the Philistines were actually one group of these sea peoples, specifically the Peliset, who ended up settling along the Canaanite coast, the area we now know as Philistia.
Hold on. So the Philistines might have started as these seafaring raiders, but they ended up putting down roots and establishing a civilization. There's got to be more to that story.
Oh, absolutely. And it's more nuanced than just showing up and taking over. You see, after the Bronze Age collapse, Egypt, which had been the dominant power in Canaan, was significantly weakened. They began to withdraw, leaving a power vacuum, and the Philistines, strategically, were perfectly positioned to take advantage of it.
So they basically saw an opportunity and seized it. That's kind of impressive, actually.
Yeah.
But what about the people already living there, the Canaanites? Didn't the Philistines drive them out?
That's a common misconception. While the Philistines were undoubtedly a powerful force, archaeological evidence suggests a different story, one of cultural fusion rather than complete replacement.
Cultural fusion. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Tell me more about that. What kind of evidence are we talking about? What does that even look like on the ground, in their pottery shards and their garbage piles?
Well, for one, the Philistines didn't force a complete cultural overhaul. When they settled in Philistia, they established their 5 main cities, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, Gath, and Gaza, collectively known as the Pentapolis. Their urban planning incorporated existing Canaanite structures, indicating a degree of integration rather than a complete erasure.
The Pentapolis 5 cities, ruled by 5 lords. Isn't it amazing how these ancient structures and names still echo through history? Okay, but let's get back to those cultural clues. What else are archaeologists finding?
Let's talk pottery. Philistine pottery had distinct styles, often with these beautiful, intricate designs. But what's fascinating is that we see striking similarities between their pottery and pottery from Mycenaean Greece.
Mycenaean Greece, as in the civilization of warrior kings and epic poems. Didn't expect that connection.
Right. It's a huge clue. This connection to Mycenaean pottery supports the idea that the Philistines, or at least a significant portion of them, originated from somewhere in the Aegean before arriving in Canaan. It also suggests the Aegean and Canaan weren't completely isolated before the Bronze Age collapse. There might have been existing trade networks and cultural exchange, which makes you wonder how much shared history there was before the Philistines even set sail.
Wow, yeah. It's like those pottery shards are pieces of a much larger puzzle, hinting at connections we're just beginning to understand. So, to settle in Philistia, they're integrating with the existing Canaanite culture, maybe even sharing some common roots.
Yeah.
But they're also known for their conflicts, right? How does that all play out?
Well, it's interesting. Remember those efficient olive presses we mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
The discovery of those presses at Ekron was significant.
Right, I remember that.
They weren't just for show. These were some of the most advanced presses of the time, allowing the Philistines to produce high-quality olive oil in larger quantities than their neighbors.
Okay, so they were like the olive oil moguls of their time.
Yeah.
Talk about a lucrative business.
Exactly. Control over olive oil production would have given them significant economic clout and influence over regional trade routes. They weren't just integrating, they were becoming a powerful force in the region. And of course, with that kind of power, conflicts were bound to arise.
Makes sense. You don't get to be a major player without ruffling a few feathers along the way, right?
Precisely. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Their interactions, even their conflicts, weren't always clear-cut. For example, there's evidence of intermarriage between Philistines and Israelites.
Intermarriage. I thought those two groups were constantly at each other's throats.
That's the common narrative. But like most things in history, it's more complicated than that. Intermarriage suggests periods of cooperation, perhaps even alliances formed out of necessity or mutual benefit. Remember, they were neighbors sharing a region with limited resources.
Right.
Conflict might have been common, but it wasn't the only story.
It really paints a different picture of their relationship, doesn't it? It wasn't just constant warfare. There were these intriguing layers of cultural exchange and even, dare I say, cooperation.
Exactly. And this complexity is crucial to understanding the Philistines. They weren't just one-dimensional antagonists. They were a society navigating a complex geopolitical landscape, forming alliances, engaging in trade, and adapting to the challenges and opportunities of their time.
And they were pretty good at it for a while. But their dominance didn't last forever, did it? What led to their eventual downfall?
Well, like all empires, their time in the sun eventually faded. Shifting trade routes, the rise of new regional powers like the Assyrians and Babylonians, internal conflicts, it all contributed to their decline. They faced increasing pressure from all sides, and their control over the region began to weaken.
It makes you wonder if those historical tides had turned differently. Could things have played out differently for the Philistines? Could they have held on to their power longer?
It's a question historians love to ponder. But here's the thing. Even though their political dominance waned, the Philistines left a lasting legacy, albeit a rather ironic one.
Okay, now you gotta tell me more. What kind of ironic legacy are we talking about?
Fast forward centuries after their decline, the Romans enter the picture. After suppressing a Jewish revolt in the 2nd century AD, they decided to rename Judea, the historical land of the Jewish people. And what name did they choose? Palestine.
Wait, Palestine? As in derived from Philistines? You're kidding. Their rival's land ends up with a name that echoes their history. That's quite the plot twist.
History is full of them. It highlights the complexities and ironies of the past. The Philistines, who had once vied for control of the region, ended up woven into its very identity, their name echoing through the centuries.
Talk about a lasting legacy, even if it's not quite what they might have imagined. So what does this all mean? We've gone from seafaring raiders to olive oil barons to a name on a map that still resonates today. It seems like the Philistines were much more than just the bad guys of the biblical narrative.
Exactly. Their story reminds us that history is never black and white. It's about understanding the nuances, the cultural exchanges, the unexpected connections, and the lasting legacies, even in defeat.
It's like those pottery shards we talked about, each one a small piece of a much larger, more intricate story waiting to be uncovered. And with the Philistines, it seems like we're only just beginning to scratch the surface. It's amazing to think that this group, often relegated to the sidelines of history, actually had such a profound impact, both in their time and even centuries later.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
It really does.
It's a great reminder that we should always dig deeper, look beyond the surface, and challenge our assumptions about the past.
Absolutely. Because the Philistines, for all their complexities and contradictions, were ultimately people just like us, trying to make their mark on the world, navigating challenges and opportunities, leaving a legacy that continues to resonate even today.
And what's fascinating is that we're still learning about them. New discoveries are being made all the time. Like, for instance, just a few years ago, archaeologists unearthed the Philistine cemetery, providing us with unprecedented insights into their burial practices, their beliefs about the afterlife, and even their fashion sense.
Okay, now you got to tell me more about the cemetery. What kind of fashion are we talking about? Were they buried in their best Mycenaean-inspired pottery?
Haha, not quite. But they did find some incredibly well-preserved textiles and jewelry. It turns out the Philistines had a thing for elaborate hairstyles and were quite skilled weavers, incorporating vibrant colors and intricate patterns into their clothing. It's these little details that really bring the past to life, don't you think?
It really does. It reminds us that they weren't just names in a history book or figures in a biblical narrative. They were real people with families' traditions and their own unique sense of style.
Exactly. And the more we learn about them, the more we realize how much they challenge our preconceived notions about the past.
I have to admit, I'm walking away from this deep dive with a whole new perspective on the Philistines. They were so much more than just the bad guys of the Bible.
That's the beauty of digging deeper, isn't it? We uncover the layers of history, challenge our assumptions, and come away with a richer understanding of the past.
Well said. And speaking of digging deeper, I'm sure our listeners have some digging of their own to do now. What stands out to you most about the Philistines? What surprised you? Because I have a feeling this conversation has sparked some serious curiosity out there.
I hope so.
Well, thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through time. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic you won't want to miss. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brains buzzing.